All right, we're live. Welcome everyone to another Between Two Coasts podcast. We got an exciting day planned for you today. As always, we're going to play our quick little jingle. Thanks again, Bob. Right? I stole your words there, Mark.
That's okay. As long as Bob gets a shout out, he'll be happy. If Bob's happy, everybody's happy, right?
That's right. All right, I'm going to share this here. You should see it on your side. Let me know, Mark. And there we go.
Tim, it looks like you've gained around 5 pounds on the chin part of that.
I know. I did. I had that moment where we're watching that. I'm like, man, that actually photo is from probably 7-8 years ago. So not only have I gained weight on the beard, but just in general, I think I've gained a lot of weight. So I was a youngster back in those days. But so again, I'm Tim Beddock from QLI.
And I am Mark Pugh from Preferred Medical. And together we are Between Two Coasts. There you go. Okay.
There it is. Welcome to episode 5. As the description says, when you signed up, we're trying to replicate virtually what we've done in person for years. I think when Mark and I first started talking about doing this kind of conference hallway recreation through Zoom, we thought we'd be done with this by now, but we're still rocking and rolling, and it seems like we're going to still be going for a while now. So thank you for joining us. You know, the goal is to have an informal catch up, a discussion. The biggest difference being that we're through Zoom and not actually in person, but someday hopefully that changes. So today's theme is going to be starting anew, and Mark, I'll let you get started with kind of the introductions.
Yeah, absolutely. We're really happy today to have with us Leisha Thompson, who does coaching and consulting services, and you can find her on LeishaThompson.com. Makes it real easy to find her. And Lori Lammy, who founded Policy Strategies. Leisha left Macy's in September 2019 after 22 years to start her own company. Lori was furloughed from WCRI in August of 2020 after 8 years. So whether it was voluntary or involuntary, both of them have recently begun kind of this new professional journey. And really, thanks to COVID, a lot of people have been faced with the same scenario, either voluntary or involuntary, kind of having to start anew, going back to the theme. And that opportunity and some cases that challenge associated with that. Hopefully, you're going to get some insights from two ladies that have actually done it recently. And different levels of the Leisha's a little bit further along than Laurie, but so I think it's very, very interesting to kind of hear their ideas on the journey and possibly let you guys chime in on the Zoom and on the chat. So if y'all have any questions, like we always do, or comments or snarky statements, feel free to put them in the chat or the Q&A feature. But before we get started, I'd like to kind of start off with helping everybody kind of understand, in case you've never met Leisha or Laurie. We'd love for y'all to share kind of something that maybe the general population doesn't know. So Leisha, if you can get us started with sharing something that maybe the rest of the work comp industry doesn't know about already.
So I guess 2 things real quickly. I consider myself to be the person who is always evolving. So always learning, always signing up for classes, just to enhance knowledge. But with that, knowledge is my quest as an international traveler, which falls under always ever most importance to me is learning and meeting new people, new cultures.
Gotcha. Well, that's a challenge nowadays. I think you have to test negative 47 times before you can get out of the country or whatever. So
yeah, I'm feeling kind of, this is hard being grounded like this for me.
Yeah.
But that's minor in comparison to the totality of the pandemic. So
since you're in Cincy, does that mean international travel now is like going to Pennsylvania? Like how does that work?
It's going across the bridge to Kentucky, huh? Where I can walk.
Gotcha. Well, Lori, other than being soda free for the past decade, what you want to share with everybody?
Well, first off, Alicia, I was thinking about this for international travel, just drive up to Canada. I mean, at least there, you've got a
It's
border
true.
you can drive to.
That may help.
I was thinking when you posed that question to me, I thought about what would I say is kind of interesting, and at least in my opinion, it's interesting, is that my first career was actually as a social worker. And I started out as a clinical social worker and ran a runaway shelter, and then later moved into the administrative side of it and did policy work, which kind of later, full circle in my career working at WCRI, brought me back to it. But it was that foundation as a social worker where you're really focused on helping people that aligned my thought processes and comfort with moving into the workers' compensation industry, because I believe that's the reason, the mission that we're all here is to improve the outcomes for injured workers. So my career as a social worker really provided a very strong foundation in terms of my mission, my personal mission to work in this field.
Interesting that you mentioned that, Laurie, because the Transitions had their second webinar a couple of weeks ago, and Victoria Kennedy from Washington State was on there, and she was talking about, from a work comp standpoint, that we may not necessarily be looking for the right specialty coming out of college all the time. We're so focused on risk management, but bringing people in work comp that are in the social sciences, social workers kind of like you, that have kind of that purpose driven, helping people, that may be actually a better fit from a personality, standpoint into workers' compensation.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I think today's discussion will kind of take us down some of those paths of understanding people's situations a little bit. So I'm excited to launch into it. So both of you started your own companies recently, albeit under different circumstances. And there are many unknowns during the initial phase that can be kind of scary, especially when you're a sole proprietor and doing this on your own, not kind of joining a partnership with someone else. So one of the primary tasks is more of an inventory of what's important to you. And Alicia, since you're a little bit further along in the process than Laurie, can you tell us a little bit about that, about the process of kind of journeying out onto your own and venturing out and doing your own thing?
Yeah, it's actually kind of funny for me because I was the person who used to tell entrepreneurs that I would never be self-employed because I like the benefit of having a biweekly check. And then in 2018, I started realizing that while I had received many, many opportunities to advance my career working in the corporate space and workers' comp, specifically in a risk management department, the entire 22 years, but I just felt it was time for me to challenge myself differently. And because I had received so many, what I call blessings along my career, that I want to be in a place where I can actually give back by helping individuals a little bit differently. So although part of my target audience is still workers' comp because I lived it, I know it intimately after 22 years, but my big focus is just working with leaders, people who identify themselves, whether it's personally or professionally, but leaders who are wanting to transition from where they are to their next phase of life. And so in 2018, I actually really spent a lot of time trying to visualize how I could use my experience from working in corporate and then add that with whatever my next would be. And I decided to utilize that in the field of coaching and consulting. So then I interviewed different people who had gone down that route as far as being a coach, because I was trying to narrow it down to what's the best school to invest my time and money in, so that I walk away fully equipped, and ended up in Chicago in classes. And then many of them were also online, but that helped me to align new skills with pre-existing. So I'm not sure how much further you would want me to go on that.
No, I think that's great. Laurie, how about yourself? A little bit different of a position, but I think probably you can share some of those similar thoughts, maybe starting anew. Can you share a little bit about those initial phases of what's next and what your thought process is?
Well, it's interesting because the concept of starting anew right now for me is it's a repetitive event because I have made changes in my career in the past where I've gone in a different direction. And when, Alicia said that, she had never really thought about being an entrepreneur and doing her own thing, I would have to say the same thing about me. It's like, in my mind, I've always been a person who's been very comfortable being a part of a team, being a part of an organization. Now, I have changed the trajectory of my career at various points due to opportunities. And like I left the field of social work and went into managed care sales and, went into policy first and then managed care sales. So for me, this decision to do something was really born out of a desire to make a difference. When I thought about what's the next chapter going to be, I thought, I want to make a difference. And whatever it is that I do, I want to make a difference. And ultimately, in our industry, making a difference is improving the outcomes for injured workers. And so it's, it's crafting that concept and making it tangible and actionable in my own consulting practice that has been the driving force for me. And I'm not as far along on it because there's components to it that we'll talk about in a few minutes that are, they're somewhat elusive to me. I have the ideas because, working for a WCRI for 8 years, I had a great opportunity to be exposed to a number of different policy issues around the country. While in that role, I could not express an opinion on changes that I thought that might need to be made, or some areas where there was opportunity for improvement in terms of state structure. And now some of those opinions I kept to myself, I would like to take to the market.
So Lori unleashed is what you're saying.
So yeah, I guess a little bit, yes.
Yeah. So when you're going through that self-inventory process, you understand what's valuable to you, and what will drive the purpose behind that. And in talking with both of y'all, and I've known Lori longer than Leisha, but I've had some great conversations with Leisha over the past couple of months. And y'all are both very purpose-driven kind of people. You're not going to hang your hat or put your name associated with something that's just there for the paycheck. So how do you translate that personal inventory of what's valuable to you into something that's kind of that is a business that you can actually get paid for?
That's a good question. So I think for me, just taking some time to evaluate what is really important to me from a standpoint of goals. And I say that because in my career, my goals became focused on the career, in all honesty. And I found that when I look back, I had set aside some of my personal goals. So I struggled with the balance of that because I wanted to show up being the best leader that I could possibly be in my career. And I feel comfortable having done that, but knowing that I sat on the shelf, if you will, some other personal goals, it became important to me to help others based on what I learned in hindsight. And so to help people, to equip them to step into their full being and find the balance, and being very conscious about choosing to excel in both is important to me, to help leaders lead differently. And so, while that became apparent to me later in my career, I was a mom. I also got divorced during that time. So balancing all of that and still showing up at work, being an effective leader because of the responsibility to not only the company, but to the people that reported to me. So through the 22 years, I had a lot of people that reported to me. And so that was important. So just navigating through that is kind of what led me to decide to take that knowledge, all of that experience, and work with other individuals who are also trying to balance, or maybe they know that it's not in balance, but they're looking for some clarity and confidence so that they can make an effective decision for their lives. And again, I emphasize personally and professionally, and it can be either or or the combination of both, to represent our whole being, right? So that's where I work with people who are transitioning from, let's say, for an example, they were caregivers for years, and now they're trying to figure out, because that part of their life has ended, they don't know sometimes what's next, who they are, who they want to be. They know they want to make some changes, but because they've been focused on caregiving for such a period of time, they don't have any type of certainty about what that looks like, what those next steps represent. And so coming from a workers' comp standpoint, I feel as though I've worked very closely with a huge array of people at differing points in their lives, whether they're an injured worker, which that's super important to me and a passion as well. In fact, I worked at Macy's corporate and built the National Return to Work program in 2009, and then led that until my job expanded. And then I was promoted to director of return to work, managed care, and then vendor management also. And so that allowed me, though, to get into the mindset of my staff through all those years, but then also injured workers and what that looks like when you can't come back to work, or because you're on a leave of absence, or you got restrictions, whether temporary or perm, but those restrictions need to be accommodated with a quickness, hopefully, so that we can bring people back. But, there are a lot of challenges and barriers there because of having to work seamlessly with all the teams. So you have the claims teams, you have the nurses in the managed care, the physicians, the leave of absence, the person's immediate supervisor or manager. And so therein lies some different challenges to bring all that together to get someone back with the appropriate accommodation. So having said all that, I share that just to say that that's the background that I come from, is where it's a lot going on, multifaceted. Money is on the table, so are emotions, though, and employees who, we want to make sure they understand the value that they do bring to the company, even when they're out, because their injury happened in the course and scope of employment. So just getting into the psychology of the human mind is a passion also. And so bringing all that together has led me to where I am now.
So you had all that in you, and you had the opportunity to kind of use it during your job, but you were so busy with so many different things that it wasn't your sole focus.
Correct.
And that kind of led strategically to you making that decision. Laurie, you're in the process of figuring out how to monetize your passion now. Alicia is a little bit further ahead of you in that regards, but you've been going through that self-inventory process as well, and trying to figure out, what's important to you, maybe even back to your social worker kind of network. So for those of the audience or other people that may be early on in that process of still trying to figure out what they want to be when they grow up, what is that like?
I think that, that's probably been the most important part of this journey for me, has been the assessment of what matters and what makes a difference. And so at the end of the day, we spend a lot of hours in our career. All of us do. We have other commitments, whether it be as a spouse, a parent, both, a caregiver. We have a lot of responsibilities in our life, but we still spend an inordinate amount of time in our work. And so I have been in a position before where I haven't been happy in a job, but I needed to have an income, and it took being really fed up for me to make a change. Or in a situation like this where I loved what I was doing, but unfortunately the position was eliminated. And so, I was like, okay, I need to do an assessment now and what's next. And in that process of the discovery of what matters, what ultimately matters, I probably have the good fortune of being further along in my career. So I've tested the waters in certain areas. And so while I wasn't 100% sure about what I wanted to do, I knew what I didn't want to do. I knew that some of the things I'd done in the past, I really didn't want to revisit those types of roles in my career. And just on the side, I've known other people that have their positions have been eliminated since the onset of COVID. So I've tried to do some networking to help people look for work, which I thought, God, I could be a recruiter. I mean, I enjoy doing that, calling up and saying, hey, I know so-and-so and they're looking, do you have an opportunity, or, what are you looking for in a candidate? And I've done that with a few people, and it's really been, I can't say that my interaction has placed anyone, but it brings me joy to know that I'm out there trying to help people. And so it really comes back to what is your purpose. And so I think for individuals right now that are, contemplating making a change or have taken a new role, when I think about an individual taking on a new role in a revenue producing environment, taking a new sales role after the onset of COVID and not being able to travel to meet clients and having to try to establish themselves in a career like that in this current environment, that's got to be daunting and challenging. And yet I know people that are doing it successfully. But so for me, it was just a question of doing this inventory. And I think any of us, using the skills that Leisha has talked about developing, I think when we are faced with either a level of discontent in what we're doing and that we're not feeling fulfilled, or potentially an external event that changes that opportunity for you, it's really, I think you'll be more successful if you truly identify what your motivating factors are. And if it is income, if number one is income, then that is going to be the bottom line on what you seek. Will it compensate me adequately for what, to meet my needs? Or if you have the ability to balance that with what matters to you and maybe take less on the income side, more so that you can do what the work that is meaningful to you, then that's great as well. And I can tell you the other day, I was talking to someone about an issue that I wanted to work on. And I said, I really don't know how to get paid for this. Maybe I'll just do it for free. And he said, you can't work for free. You can't. He said, you undervalue yourself when you work for free. And I'm like, okay. It's just like, I'm a social worker. Of course I'll give it away, and he was like, you can't do that. And it was kind of it was a pretty empowering conversation, because I realized, wow, my inclination is just to do for others. And so at the end of the day, if you're going to start your own business, you can't be a consultant who does all the work for free. So the monetizing this aspect of it is still the area where it's the least fluid for me. I really have. I mean, if anybody who's on this webinar wants to give me some tips, I'm all ears, because I am full of ideas.
That's awesome. And to kind of make the connection back to Lori, when you were talking about your intro and kind of what drives you, to tie all this back to the injured worker, right? We're in the workers' compensation space. Everyone can probably name a few people that have been impacted by COVID, that have been furloughed or lost their jobs or income, reduced of some sort. A lot of people can't really name somebody who's probably lost a limb on the job or suffered a catastrophic injury on the job. So those are things that people don't expect to happen, much like you don't expect COVID to hit and for all of these things to people to be furloughed. Are there any takeaways that you guys have had through your journey or through your self-inventory or through your self-discovery that you think back to your careers in the work comp space of along the way that would have been helpful in kind of empathizing with the injured worker on their new journey or what their new path looks like? Because that's what it is all about, right? It is about helping people navigate the world after a workplace injury. And so I know it's kind of connecting two different scenarios, but I think they are very similar because they are life-changing. They are affecting your workplace. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, what comes to mind for me is I would encourage people to think about what they would do if they knew they wouldn't fail. Because a lot of times fear is what keeps us sitting right where we are, even when we know we want different or we want more. However, we define that differently, right? And so sometimes it's not to say we don't like our jobs, but we are sometimes bigger and we have more vision than one particular job or career path. So I would just encourage people to think about, from time to time, doing a self-assessment about what you would do if you knew you wouldn't fail And if you can eliminate the fear factor, then you can sometimes create a vision for yourself a little easier, and then decide if you are doing and spending the majority of your working hours. To your point, Lori, we're at work more than we're not. And so it shouldn't matter where we spend that amount of time. That should be a conscious decision, not, in my opinion, it should be a conscious decision, not one made by happenstance, driven by money. So we hopefully spend our time doing what is really important to us and are compensated well for doing that.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you make a good point of oftentimes when people are injured on the job, they miss work, right? And I think a lot of the times claims get looked at as, well, they're just, abusing the system, or they're just doing something. Like, oftentimes that's not the case, especially in the catastrophic world. People want to get back to work. People want to do those things, but they're relying on people to help them through that journey. You talked about, Alicia, you talked about the team to help an injured worker return to work. There are a lot of moving pieces. And if one person isn't providing the support, it can quickly kind of derail that person's journey or that path. So I think it's interesting to really think about it. Like, a lot of times the goal is for these people, even for themselves, they want to get back to work, but they need people to help them who can understand their situation. And so I think that's pretty powerful.
I think we should assume positive intent also, that the majority of the people do want to come back, whether they need some guidance on how to make that happen or not, could be the reality. But I don't want to look at it from the standpoint that because they're out, they're okay getting a check, because sometimes there's a lot more going on in their lives or in their mind, or even at work, who they report to or what they're doing. I mean, there are a lot of things going on. Not that we solve all those problems, but it does sometimes come up in the conversation. So.
Sure.
Everybody's probably heard the term fog of war, where it's just really confusing and you're not really sure which way is going, and things are happening very, very quickly. I think we've got a fog about COVID. COVID hit very, very suddenly, and it had all sorts of, unintended consequences, or really a lot of unforeseeable things. How do you become comfortable with the unknown? Because when you're starting anew, there's more that you don't know than you do know. Of course, it depends on if you're in Leisha's position, where you were kind of able to strategize and think in advance. Maybe there's a little bit less uncertainty. In Lori's position, it was like, boom, you're out of the nest. What are you going to do now? So, how do you get comfortable with the unknown? Because I think that's something that we've all been dealing with. Lori, in your circumstance, getting comfortable with the fact that you don't have control, that you don't know everything, that you don't know everything that you need to know. You don't even know everything that you don't know yet. How do you deal with that and come to rest with that?
I have to say, honestly, that was most likely the biggest challenge for me. Was really, once you get past kind of a stage of shock and disappointment about a lifestyle change. I mean, the Institute's a marvelous place to work, and I love my career there. And you have to do an assessment of, at least for me, I had to do an assessment. What is the next chapter going to look like? Because otherwise, I could have just sat there in a state of despair, an ending state of despair, and you have to pick up you pick up the pieces and say, what's next for me? And this November, or I think it was in December, Kimberly George hosted a panel at the Compilati seminar with 4 injured workers that have been catastrophically injured, and what their lives had evolved into following those injuries. And it was, in my opinion, it was an amazing session, but it was a really powerful session because these 4 individuals had life-altering events happen to them as a result of a workplace injury, that they could no longer be the individual that they were previously because their injuries were so significant. And then they went back and went about recreating themselves, and it was kind of, they didn't have the luxury, and I say the luxury of making a choice to recreate. They were forced to recreate, and they all did that I think with defining a sense of purpose and where can I add value? How can I be independent if their injuries were such that they couldn't do none of them could return to the work that they did previously. So, in my mind, it's that experience of, the inventory is critical. The inventory, like Alicia did that inventory in preparation for making this career change. I did it post, but it ultimately has been the deciding factor that when you really have clarity of purpose and you work through that, you can do a Ben Franklin sheet for all that, if you want to make it that basic, but when you have clarity of purpose, it really does help you change the way you approach it, because you no longer are looking at what do I do next? You're now looking at what am I going to do next? It's like, I'm going to take control. I'm going to get the reins and I'm going to, get my wagon back on the trail. And so, I would say anyone right now, whether it's a person who has gone through an injury at work or a person who's gone through a career change, think about starting anew. Relationships are being tested in the COVID environment. And some of them are not making it. And so there may be some people that are getting divorced during this difficult time and having to reestablish, or parents that have been trying to homeschool their children. And most of the time, the stories I hear, not without difficulty. My son's in college, so I fortunately got past that. But, there's all of these different things that we're being challenged with. And I think if you can hone your thoughts toward where you can take control and where you can drive your future, for me, that's been very empowering. Now, the monetizing aspects of it have been a little hard for me to figure out, but the concept of where I want to make a difference and how I think I can, that becomes clearer each day.
Gotcha. Well, Alicia put on her glasses, so she's really serious now. What would you have to say about trying to find comfort in the?
Well, before I respond to that, I wanted to tag on to what Lori mentioned as well, but also adding to that, I would encourage people to create a vision and then create the steps to secure the goal, the vision being the goal. So if you start with the end, sometimes it's easier to create the roadmap to get to your destination than it is to start with what steps do I need to actually take if you're foggy still on the ultimate goal, if that makes sense. So, and then now your question.
Getting comfortable in the unknown. How do you navigate through that process?
So, for me in the unknown, I think I became accustomed to working in the unknown somewhat as a leader at Macy's, meaning constantly looking at ways to improve everything, basically. At the end of the year, fourth quarter each year, I'm looking at objectives and creating them for the next year for my team and for the department. And so working in the unknown, and gray for me meant have the vision, know the end goal, and then start creating steps strategically. And for whatever reason, taking that first step seems to open up the door to figure out how to fill in the other pieces of the process.
Gotcha. That's how oftentimes I create my outlines when I'm writing things. Preparing a PowerPoint is I create that high level outline. I know the thesis, I know the abstract of what the point that I'm trying to make, but as I'm building the outline, it's the 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D make it a lot easier when I've got a 1 as opposed to just starting with the 1D. And I think that's what both of y'all are saying.
Mm-hmm. And then add a timeline to it, right? So that we don't procrastinate and so that we don't fail in executing. Mm-hmm. So that has always been helpful, to add a due date and work toward delivering prior to the due date.
Yep.
You made a point about failure though, and I do think fear is a motivator at times, but fear can also be incapacitating. And so Absolutely. When you the reality of starting out new is, okay, will this work? And, you know, I've submitted a proposal on something and was turned down. And I was like, oh, well, I didn't particularly like that, but you know, it's going to happen. And, you know, you can learn from those experiences, but at the end, it is whether, I mean, I think when your purpose really becomes so, I have clarity of purpose. And now that I have that, it is much more of a motivating factor in starting anew, is really truly understanding, because, you know, we have to do inventories at various points in our life. We're doing inventories in our role as in our personal life as well as in our professional life.
Yep.
And if what drives you is making a difference, then you have to find a way to, you know, capitalize on that. And Leisha, you've done a very effective job in creating your consulting and coaching practice. And so
Thanks.
mine is to work on policy issues that would improve the outcomes for injured workers. And so it's a little less tangible in the sense that I can't, it's a broader paintbrush, let's just say, but I still have ideas and thoughts about things that could be done in various parts of the country to improve the delivery of benefits to injured workers. And it's developing the roadmap. And it's work. I'd have to say it's a lot more work to try to create from a blank slate. Like you're talking about creating that outline. It's like, you know, just, okay, what are the, you know, I want to make a difference on the top of the paper. And then the steps on which to go about doing it it's in my humble opinion, not having been entrepreneurial in nature, that to me is a harder part of the exercise.
Yeah.
Is the execution aspects.
Well, I along those lines, I know we're getting close to the end here, but you know, how do you find people to advise you or help you through that process? I think that's a big piece of the puzzle too, of like, what networks are you reaching out to? What are there groups out there that people should, you know, consult or look into? I think you guys both come from strong professional networks, so I'm sure that's kind of what you rely on and who you reach out to. But any guidance there for people that may be looking to venture out?
Sometimes word of mouth, speaking with someone who you trust, to be honest, and that they have some other connections. And then oftentimes they are willing to do the introduction to someone. You're not necessarily asking for a job, you're just seeking knowledge. So
Yep.
It's okay to ask people for that connection if you know someone who might be willing to put you in touch. And that seems to make it a little easier than, you know, I wouldn't advise cold calling and all of that, because you just don't know whose opinion you really can trust if it happens that way. But going through someone that you know to be knowledgeable and trustworthy, I think is a good start.
Yeah, I would second that. I would say that it is really, you know, I've had a series of interviews with people that I've asked them, what were the steps that you took to execute starting out on your own? What did you do? And, you know, what were the challenges? And, you know, honestly, the one monetizing it, as you mentioned earlier, Mark, that's kind of a universal theme. There is work to be done in that. And then really understanding your value and how do you monetize your value? And so, you know, but that's basically the best way that I've approached this, because no one said, oh, Lori, let me just help you do all of this. It's really been, well, I shouldn't say that. I have had some help because I'm not all that technically proficient. But, you know, you do have the, you know, it's relying on those people that you respect and admire in the industry, saying, hey, you have some insight on how you did this. And like, I'm going to be having a conversation with Alicia to get some advice from her because she's further along in this process. And so, you know, I think that I would highly recommend to anyone right now who's thinking about making a change, pick up the phone with people that you trust and start to have those conversations and get some feedback, get some guidance and counseling, and, you know, help build the strength in your network. And you know, if I somebody can easily email me, I'll be happy to do what I can to help. I mean, you know, that's what I'm here for, and that's not monetized. It's just, remember, I give everything away. So
Well, I know a bunch of people in work comp as y'all do as well. And I would think the vast majority of people in work comp, if they've got an outreach from someone going, I'm really confused, I'm not happy, or I just got laid off or whatever. Do you have 15 or 20 minutes that you can just help me kind of talk through? The vast majority of people in work comp are going to accept that invitation at the drop of a hat. And I think that's what makes not being able to be with one another together at conferences because this is more than just an industry where you get a biweekly paycheck. That you become friends with people.
Yeah.
It's well beyond colleagues. There's friendship associated with that. And when you've got that, you've got a wider network for people certainly to be able to reach out to. As we kind of finish things up, I'd love for y'all to maybe distill, and y'all have shared a lot of great insights, I think, for people who may be on the verge of making a decision, or are in that process, or maybe advising someone else that they're very happy with what they've got going on, but they've got kind of a relationship with someone and they're trying to figure out how to do that. If you could distill maybe one word of wisdom, well, not one word, but one phrase or one sentence or 1 minute of wisdom that kind of distills everything that you've learned in your journey up to this point that would help someone who's on that journey, going to be on that journey, helping someone else with that journey. What would that word of wisdom or words of wisdom be? Alicia, we'll start with you. Anything that you want to kind of summarize everything that we've talked about so far?
Sure. I would just encourage people to be bold. I want people not to be passive in life in general. That's just me, my personality, because I think we miss out on opportunities by being passive. So I encourage people to be bold, daring, visionaries, and learn to be uncomfortable in the gray, because that's typically short term, but it's necessary often so that you can start formalizing and solidifying your thought process, and be open to taking calculated risk, so that a year from now, you're not sitting in the same position. And that's what's important to me for people to understand. Without all of these things and that type of attitude, we could still be sitting right where we are right now, thinking, I wish I did, or I want, I should, all of that isn't productive, in my opinion.
Yeah, regrets are not something that you want to live with on a constant daily basis, for sure.
No, that's not a warm fuzzy.
Yeah, no, it's not. Most definitely. Lori, what words of wisdom would you like to share?
I think first and foremost is give some thought as to what really matters. Where do you feel fulfilled? And if you feel fulfilled through compensation, then be looking at a position or roles that would enable you to increase your compensation. If you feel fulfilled managing people and growing teams, look to see where's that opportunity where you can exercise or develop those skills. But really, most of all, I would say ask for help, because we really are a community. Our industry is a community. It has a finite number of people in it. And even if you're thinking about leaving the work comp market, ask for help. I mean, that has been honestly for me, a very validating exercise, but it also provides value for me when someone comes to me and asks me for help, because it gives me a purpose of being able to provide it. So I would say, 2 things. One, do an inventory on what really matters. And don't feel bad about if it literally is about making money, and that's where you are at that point in your life, you have a family to support or whatever it is, then, try to find the path that gets you there. But, or even sometimes it's just really being acknowledged in the workplace, but ask for help along the way, because honestly, I think we all grow through the support of each other, and we open up doors as a result of that.
Yeah, Patrick Robinson made a really good point in the chat. You can do things for a long time, enjoy them, but then decide you want to do something different. There's nothing wrong with a decision to change career paths. So I think, as you talk about anew, it may be something that you're frustrated or disappointed, or you're not feeling fulfilled, or you're not able to achieve your goals in the current job. And in some cases, just like, okay, there's a shelf life to this, and I've kind of been there, done that. I feel comfortable with what I've done, and it's just time to do something different. And there's really not a good or bad way to start anew, but there are certainly different motivations. So we definitely didn't want to leave it with, only people who are ticked off at their current job.
No,
This is applicable to
No.
you.
Yep.
no.
Sometimes it's exciting to start something new, to learn different things, and to continue to grow and evolve. So we could be doing excellently in our current position, but just need that charge every now and then to learn something new.
Mhm.
Very much.
Tim,
so.
any final words of wisdom?
No,
Yeah.
I don't think so. I think I appreciate you guys sharing your experience and your knowledge, and maybe motivating people to start that pursuit of whatever that passion is, especially if they're, to Mark's point, it's not, you don't have to be unhappy, but maybe you're just not passionate about what you're doing. But also, I think there's also this side of sparking that passion again and focusing, maybe realigning some of your focus to make sure you're living up to them and focusing on the injured worker and helping them through those journeys too. So that's about all I've got, Mark, on my end. So
Can I
Well,
say,
it's-
it may also, we may not be talking about a job change. I don't want people to think starting a
Yep.
new, and that we're encouraging everyone to. So it could just be picking up those interests that I mentioned at the beginning when we started talking about that we just didn't consciously take time to pursue.
yep,
Mhm.
exactly.
You can definitely grow in your existing scenario. That you don't have to leave in order to grow, for sure.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, we really appreciate, Lori, Leisha, your time today, your experience, your transparency, and kind of what you have discovered along the way. Hopefully this has been helpful to folks in the audience. As usual, this will be posted on our YouTube channel so other people can watch it. We are scheduled for our episode 6. I'm talking about starting anew. This was an idea that Tim and I came up with last fall, and we can't believe that we've already done 5 of these. We haven't figured out our guest yet.
Yep.
So we're working on that, but definitely, set aside your calendar for March 11th at 11:30 a.m. Eastern time again. And we will definitely be having some compelling content. But Lori and Leisha, thank you so much for being a part of this and sharing your wisdom, and wish you both great success in your future endeavors.
Yes.
Thank you.
Lori, thank
Appreciate
you.
the opportunity.
Definitely. And before we peel off, please invite friends, family, people in the industry. We want to keep growing this. So, and to Mark's point, if we don't have a guest yet, we have a few in mind, but if you want to be a guest or somebody that's doing some amazing things in the industry, we'd love to have them on. I mean, that's what this is about. Some of the stories that you hear on the conference floors of some exciting things happening. We'd love to be able to bring that to the audience. So if you have any ideas or you want to be a part of it, reach out to Mark and I, and we can fit you into our long schedule. We've got so many people backed up, but and it is every second Thursday of each month. So we look forward to having everyone join us again.
Thank you.
All right. Well,
All
y'all
right.
be safe and
Bye,
enjoy
everyone.
the 13th month of 2020.
Thank you.
Right.
Stay safe.
Take care,
Be safe.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.